Hi everyone, my name is Tanya Hertz, and today we are going to be going over Chapter 1, which is an introductory chapter, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Now, we're going to be looking at the PowerPoints to Chapter 1 while we are covering the material. Now, you'll notice in your PowerPoint slides there are missing or blank spots. The slides that I'm going over in these videos, there no longer are blank spots, so you can fill them in as you go. Should be helpful for you. So Chapter 1 is an introductory chapter, just like many chapters or most chapters in all of your textbooks. And we're going to be talking about some of the basics of business. So a business is any organization or activity that provides a good or services to earn a profit. A good is a tangible item, something that we can touch. Services are intangible. Businesses earn profits in or sales revenue minus expenses. A loss occurs when a business, or a loss occurs rather, when a business incurs expenses that are greater than its revenue. It's important when we're talking about business, you have to talk about entrepreneurship when you talk about business, because the bulk of all businesses in the United States are entrepreneurial businesses, small businesses. Over 99% of the businesses here in the United States are entrepreneurial. In order to be considered an entrepreneur, so first of all, an entrepreneur is anyone who starts a business, somebody who risks their time, their money, any other of the resources they have to start and manage a business. And in order to be considered an entrepreneur, you must have ownership of the business. If you don't have ownership of the business, what are we called? We're called an employee, right? We're called an employee. So the function of business is to improve the standard of living of the people and to contribute to a higher quality of life. So standard of living is the degree of wealth and materials available to a person in a certain geographical area. Quality of life is the standard of health, comfort, happiness that is experienced by a person. This is usually dependent upon their income and the quality and availability of employment in a given area. Businesses provides products, services that people need in order to function. They provide jobs. They contribute to society through innovation, particularly entrepreneurial businesses do so. So let's talk a little bit about the history of business. So business historians divide American business history into 5 eras, which are shown on the slide in front of you. The first is the Industrial Revolution. So from the mid-1700s, mass production started gaining importance. Big factories started overtaking skilled artisans, and workshops sort of disappeared. So that was followed by the entrepreneurship era. So during the second half of the 1800s, large-scale entrepreneurs built business empires. They generated wealth for society. They raised the standard of living. And in the early part of the 1900s, major businesses refined their production processes and they created greater efficiencies. We also often call the production era the efficiency era. This is the Henry Ford era, the assembly line era, So in the production era, jobs became even more specialized, increased productivity, they lowered costs, lowered prices, but something to remember, and we'll talk about this in later chapters, when there is increased efficiency and productivity, often the sort of dark side of that, the converse side of that, is there's also decreased motivation and decreased happiness and satisfaction, because can you imagine doing the same thing over and over and over and over again? And that's what really happened in that production or assembly line era. Okay, so after the Second World War, markets shifted from consumer-centric attitudes to, from a producer-centric attitude to a consumer-centric attitude by moving towards or providing consumers with many more choices. This is the marketing era, the Mad Men era. Today, we've shifted away from sort of producing something and then pushing it out onto consumers. Instead, we're more of a pull marketing approach, and we call the era that we're in today the relationship era. We understand the importance of building long-term relationships with consumers, because if we meet the needs of the consumers, if we provide excellent customer service, if we give them what they want, the consumers will be able to give us as businesses large-scale publicity by saying good things about the business, by telling their friends, their family, through word of mouth, through social media, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important also that you understand what a nonprofit is in business. So a lot of people, because of the name of nonprofit, they think, okay, we don't need to make money. That's not essentially what a nonprofit means. Nonprofits still need to generate profits. They need to generate revenues. We call them nonprofits because it's what they do with those profits that they earn that's different. So a nonprofit is like a business. They employ people, they produce goods, they produce services, but there aren't owners, right? There aren't owners of nonprofits. Instead, we call them founders, and they become employees of the company. When they make money, they're not generating profits for the founders, and that's why we call them nonprofits. It's with those profits and the revenues that goes back into the business, and it contributes to the community, to society, to the goal of the business. And there are a lot of different goals that nonprofits have. They generate revenue for health concerns, human services, education, art, religion, other societal goals other than just maximizing shareholder wealth, which is the goal of a traditional for-profit business. Oh, another name for a nonprofit, in case anybody says this, just if somebody calls it a 501c3, they mean nonprofit. That's just the IRS code for a nonprofit. So let's talk a little bit about the factors of production. So businesses depend on the factors of production to achieve their objectives. The factors of production help the economic system to function. They help to create wealth. So factors of production are any elements that businesses need to achieve those objectives. They include things like natural resources, capital resources, and other resources that we'll go into. So natural resources include land, fresh water, mineral deposits. The value of natural resources tend to rise with high demand, low supply, or both. And we'll talk a little bit more about supply and demand when we get into the economics chapter. Capital resources include things like machines, tools, business, information, technology. Now, one thing I want to say, because this gets confusing for people, when we say capital, you're thinking money, right? So capital resources do not include money or any sort of capital assets when we're talking about factors of production. Capital, in terms of money capital, can be used to buy factors, capital resources, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about buildings, land, not land, tools, information. Land would be under what? Natural resources. Good. All right, so other resources that we need, that every business needs to succeed, human resources, right? The people in the organization. But it's not just the people, it's everything that the people know, everyone that the people know. So their intelligence, their creative contributions, their who they know and what they know, all contribute to the human resources. And human resources are an excellent source of competitive advantage for a business. And we'll talk a little bit more about competitive advantage later, but just suffice it to say that competitive advantage essentially means an advantage that we have as a business over the competition. And human resources are an excellent source of not only competitive advantage, but sustainable competitive advantage that we can hold on to. It's also important that we talk about entrepreneurs when we're talking about factors of production, because entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship creates opportunities by harnessing those factors of productions and making and really boosting the economy up and making a higher quality of life possible. Entrepreneurship is so important in the U.S. economy. It's vital to the U.S. economy. It's big in the United States. 543 new businesses are started, not every year in the United States, every month in the United States. And it's more possible here than anywhere else because of our economic system of capitalism, but also because here in the U.S. we have a really different view towards risk and towards failure. It's not such a big deal if we fail, we try again. And also there are a lot of government resources out there to help us as entrepreneurs, including the Small Business Administration and other resources. We'll talk more about that later. Incidentally, I'll say this now and I'll say it again. My background is in entrepreneurship. I teach a lot of entrepreneurship classes at Miramar and at San Diego State. If you ever thought about starting your own company and you want to be successful, take one of the entrepreneurship classes. At Miramar right now, we're teaching Business 155 and 157. There's also a 129 class. Any of those 3 classes, those are the entrepreneurship classes over there. And research shows that if you take an entrepreneurship class, you minimize the probability of failure. And so you maximize the probability of succeeding in a business. So take an entrepreneurship class if you want to learn how to be successful in running your own company, because with a business degree, you can do many things, but an entrepreneurship class will help you start your own business. So let's talk a little bit about the environment of business. Businesses don't operate as a closed system. Outside factors are going to play a vital role in determining whether individual businesses will succeed or will fail. And so let's look at some of those impacts on the business environment, including the economic environment. So we know, I said this briefly, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, that the United States, we are in a capitalistic society. Capitalism is our economic system, but it's not pure capitalism, right? Because in a purely capitalistic society, there would be absolutely no social programs. There would be no government intervention. You know, we have a little mix of socialism. Of course, we have, you know, the fire department and the police department are not run for profit. Although some social programs are still in this country run for profit, like healthcare. But at any rate, we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But we do have kind of a mixed system, primarily capitalistic. Governments do take active steps to, even in a capitalistic society, to reduce the risks of business of the economic environment, to stabilize the economy often, to induce growth in the economy. These can be affected by corruption, by ethical lapses, such as shady accounting practices. We've all seen that, and that was a large part was the catalyst for the great financial crisis of 2008. Corporate lobbying is also extremely problematic on the economic environment and can negatively affect the way that businesses, the way that our capitalistic society operates, and can have really unintended and very harmful consequences. But we'll talk more about that when we talk about business ethics. I don't want to get too off topic here. Also, let's talk a little bit about the competitive environment. That has an impact on the business environment as well. So we said before, what era are we in now? I didn't hear you. We're in the relationship era of business in the United States. So companies need to develop that mutually beneficial relationship with the customers. It's so important if we want to be successful as a business. We need to listen to the customers and we need to give them what they want. We're no longer in the push type of marketing. It's more pull. We listen to the customers. We give them what they want. We solve problems for our customers. It's important to understand that speed to market can provide a competitive advantage. Remember, competitive advantage is the advantage we have over the competition. Speed to market just is how fast can we get our product or service to market from the conception or the idea stage all the way to the commercialization or the profit stage. Speed to market is really important to understand how it can help our business. There are a couple of different advantages we can have when it comes to speed to market. There's what's called a first mover advantage. First mover advantage is just like it sounds. We're the first one to get that particular product or service to market, and there's advantages to that. Think about what those advantages are, right? You're the first one. That means there's no competition at first, right? But even with being the first to market and having no competition, that doesn't last, right? Even when you have intellectual property protection, that doesn't last. And there are also bad things to being first to market. So think about some of the bad things about being the first one. If you're the only one selling whatever it is, that means there's no playbook. You're out there, you know, making it up, trying to figure it out. I mean, obviously not totally making it up. You're listening to your customers and things like that, but there's problems with that. And so we also can have a second mover advantage. By that, not necessarily that we're second, but we're not the very first ones to market. There's advantages to that as well. So speed to market has an impact on how successful we are. So remember when I said human resources might be a tremendous source of sustainable competitive advantage? What do we call that? We call that workforce advantage. Finding, and then having and holding the best people in the firm is a tremendous source of advantage to a competition or to a company against the competition. Right? So it is vitally important that we keep our employees dedicated and we keep them satisfied in our organization. When you go back and look at business throughout history, you know, old school business leaders, managers, they didn't care if their employees were satisfied, were happy, were loving what they did. But companies that understand organizational behavior and understand workforce advantage, they understand that they need to keep their employees satisfied and committed and coming back and loving what they do if they want that advantage against the competition. And this is a great way to win over the competition, by having the best people at your organization who don't want to leave. Okay, a little bit about the technical environment. So digital technology has really transformed the way we do business. That goes without saying. We'll talk a lot more about that later in the semester. When I'm talking about business technology, we're talking about any tool that you use as a business to become either more efficient or more effective. E-commerce is a type of business technology, right? Selling things online, many other types. Talk a little bit about the social environment, because that has an impact on the business environment. So when I'm talking about the social environment, we're talking about the values, the attitudes, the customs, the beliefs that are shared by a particular group of people. And this is different. All different people have different values, different attitudes, etc. I just uploaded to Blackboard some slides on generational cohorts. I might make a video for that too later. I'll let you know if there's a video on there. But definitely read about cohort analyses. That has a big impact on businesses, the way that different people from, it's a generational cohort analysis, not just a cohort, generational cohort, because different generations behave differently, and that has a big impact on business, both from our employee standpoint and our customer standpoint, our consumer standpoint. So demographics are any measurable characteristic of a population. Think about what kind of demographics you might have. It might be age, it might be race, it might be income, education level. All of these are examples of demographics, and companies need to pay attention to both demographics and social trends because it affects the way that we do business, right? And what are some of the trends that are happening in society? Well, we know that we have a more diverse population than ever before. We have an aging population. Baby boomers are getting older. And again, I'll talk to you about this in the generational, or you can review the generational cohort slides to learn a little bit more about that. Also, and business ethics and social responsibility is really having an impact on the way that we do business. What workers expect of us as business leaders and what business leaders expect of their workers, and we call that the psychological contract between workers and the businesses has really changed. People expect different things from a company. We no longer expect as workers that we might work at the same company for our entire lives and we'll have this wonderful job security. We know that's not true anymore, especially after we saw what happened during the financial crisis, right? But we do expect other things. We expect that we'll be treated well in our organization. We expect more flexibility. We expect time off from work when we need time off. We expect a work-life balance nowadays, right? And in exchange, businesses expect that their employees will put forth extra effort when needed, will work harder, will continually improve their skills, particularly things like their soft skills. So things like communication skills and teamwork abilities and all of these types of things. And so this is always changing and has an impact on how we do business. Sorry about that. It's important to note as well that the U.S. economy continually interacts with economies of other countries because of technology, right? Free trade. They've blurred the lines between what's happening in the U.S. and what's happening in the world. And the migration of jobs closely relates to the global movement towards free trade. And it's important that we understand that what's happening on a global scale affects what's happening in business in the United States. We do not operate in a bubble. It's not a closed system. We'll look at GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which is a trade agreement that was signed by 125 countries, and it lowers taxes and imports, and essentially is there to reduce trade restrictions. There, I shouldn't have talked about it right then. Here, I didn't realize I had a slide for it. So GATT, like I said, there's 125 countries that have signed that trade agreement. Also, things you have to think about, things like war, terrorism, disease, natural disasters. All of these take an economic toll, and we are not operating in a vacuum here in the United States. Even though we have a strong, robust economy, things like this have an impact on the way that businesses operate. And think about things like trade wars and how that actually has an impact on the way that we do business. So I think there's, for some of you, there's actually a slide in there. I'm sorry, not a slide. I think what I'm trying to say. Oh, I gave you an assignment in Canvas, in the Canvas system. So some of you look at your assignments. I have an assignment on global trade, on trade wars. I really want you to understand how things like a trade war can actually have an impact on the way that we, on our economy here, the way that we do business here in the United States. All right, lastly, the very last thing I want to talk about in chapter 1 is business. Business is a wonderful, wonderful thing to study. It's a career choice that I would recommend for many people. This was my passion, is entrepreneurship and business. But you need to make sure that whatever choice you make within business aligns with your own personal, your personal passions, your personal beliefs, your personal goals. Just because you're going into business does not mean that you're some cutthroat corporate executive who cares only about the bottom line. We know more and more today in business that it's the triple bottom line that matters, right? It's not just profits, but it's also the people and planets. And so if you can find a way to be successful in business and align that to your own personal goals and your own values, there's a higher probability that you'll be successful. It's important that you gain as many skills as you can, business skills as you can, if you do want to be successful. Businesses are looking for hard technical skills that you'll learn here in your classes at Miramar College. But we're also looking for those soft skills, like I said before, things like communication skills, teamwork skills, problem-solving skills, the ability to think rationally and to think outside of the box. We're looking for people who can do those kinds of things. And so while you're developing those or building those business skills, also think about how you can build the soft skills at the same time and be the best that you can be, so that you have the highest probability of actually getting a job and being successful and making a lot of money based on what you love to do. And one thing I do want to say about business, you don't have to necessarily work for another person to be successful at business. There are so many options in terms of entrepreneurship. Like I said, that was my passion. I love starting companies. I've been pretty successful doing that in life. And if that's something that you're interested in, take one of my entrepreneurship classes. I've helped a lot of students. I feel like I've been there to help them to be successful, and a lot of students have gone on from those classes to start really successful companies and make millions and millions of dollars in a very short amount of time. So if that's something you're interested in, take those classes as well. If not, and you want to go into one of the work as an employee in a business, definitely take all the business classes you can. but there's a lot of different fields you can choose: accounting, finance, human resource management. There's so many different things, and they're all a lot of fun, but pick what you love. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the share here and actually go back here and say thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your class, and I will see you in chapter 2.